A police officer was abducted, and he wasn't the only one. Multiple cases describe the same beings marked by the same emblem. One of these abductions was witnessed by several people and was officially reported by the police as a close encounter of the third kind.
Hey, I was about 8 years old and I was alone at home on the farm. Everybody else had gone. I was riding my bike on the clay driveway, and I look up and there's like a triangle, like it looked like a sticker, like a black sticker that was just stuck in the sky. It was huge. And I look down and I'm actually floating off the ground and my toes are pointing to the ground. My arms are level like my body, but they weren't out sticking. And I just kept looking at this triangle, and then it just rotated and slowly moved off at the top of the pine trees. And then I looked down, and I'm still standing on the ground again. So I don't know what it was, but ever since then, there's been like occurrences that happen where I will see things of different shapes, sizes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Debriefed. My name is Chris Ramsey, and today we are going to be taking a look at one of the most infamous abduction cases in the history of the United States of America. This is the story of Herbert Schirmer. The reason it's one of the most important cases of abductions is that Schirmer was a police officer, but not only that, he'd also served in the United States Navy and was awarded the National Defense Service Medal. So a very credible witness indeed. This case happened in the 60s. It was investigated by the Condon Committee. There was hypnotic regression involved. And beyond all that, there are also some really interesting connections to be made to other cases, which we're going to look into, namely Filiberto Cárdenas, Bill Herrmann, and of course, the Lacerta Files. How does Lacerta tie into all of this? Well, we're about to find out, folks. Before we do, a quick message from our sponsors. All right, here's something weird. There are companies out there called data brokers whose whole job is to follow you around the internet like a nosy neighbor. Except instead of gossip, they're collecting everything. Your name, your address, shopping habits, even that thing you searched at 2 a.m. that you immediately regretted. Yes, that thing. And they sell it over and over and over and over. Like it's a yard sale of your private life. That's why I use Incogni. You see, Incogni, they don't just block that stuff. They delete it. They reach out to hundreds of these shady companies and legally force them to remove your info. It's like sending in a team of digital cleanup agents. Except you don't have to lift a finger. Go to incogni.com/area52 and use code area52 to save 60% off your annual plan. If you're online, your data's out there. Might as well do something about it. All right, folks, we paid the bills. Like this video, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Without any further ado, let's get into this. We have a few things to cover today. Obviously, we're going to go through Herbert Schirmer's testimony. We've basically pulled transcript from one of his talks that was recorded, so we'll be reading through that, but also there's some other information that has surfaced. Wait and see how all of this connects, because it connects in a way that was, to me, completely unexpected. I was reading through this case and I started going, wait a minute, what about this? What about that? Oh my God, this connects to that. This case over here, the craft is the same. The beings are the same. The symbols are the same. Very interesting stuff we're all going to get into. I'm very excited about this episode. And here, by the way, I've got some really cool books. This book here features a lot of the news articles written about Schirmer at the time. And if you guys want to check this out, this is a sort of graphic novel or, comic book, if you like, about December 3rd, 1967, the abduction of Herbert Schirmer, put together from the interview that we're going to be reading through today. So if you see me cutting to any B-roll of this, of these cartoon images, it's in here. I will also be referencing things from Contact from Reticulum and the update versions by Colonel Wendell Stevens, as well as UFO Contact from Undersea by Virgilio Sanchez Osejo and Wendell Stevens as well. To give you a bit of a history here, he served from 1964 to 1967 in the U.S. Navy When he retired from the Navy, now his father was retired Air Force at the time, and following in his father's footsteps, he kind of wanted to be enlisted as well. But then subsequent to that, found himself a little bit lost and thinking, man, I have all these skills. What do I do with it? He decides to become a police officer in Ashland, Nebraska. Now, what's really interesting about December 3rd, 1967, the alien encounter of Herbert Schirmer, is in his police log, he actually logged in that he saw a flying saucer, which is kind of crazy. We'd expect police officers at least to keep that information. You don't want to put that out there, maybe fear of ridicule. But yeah, he did indeed log that in as such. This is transcript directly from an interview with Herbert Schirmer. Now, in here, I think he pretty much goes over the entire sequence of events based on both hypnotic regressions that he went through, whereas at first, he didn't really know what happened. He just had some missing time and checked his logbook to find that he had written down at 2:30 a.m., December 3rd, 1967, I saw a UFO at Junction 6 and 63. Believe it or not. It was only then that the case got investigated by the Condon Committee and that they suggested to Mr. Schirmer to go and visit Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who was the regression hypnotherapist that they used for such contactee cases. So Sprinkle obviously was already familiar with UFO abductions. That would have been his first session then. Now, after that, Schirmer was incredibly ridiculed at the police office, by the media, by so many different people. Eventually, he just retired and then went to go see another hypnotherapist, Loring G. Williams in Des Moines, Iowa, to have his second regression. He resigned from the police office a few months after due to stress and ridicule. What we're going to read is a transcript of an interview with him, but again, he takes into account all of his regression sessions. There's no pause in between. This is the story, how his mind remembers it. It was around 2:30, actually, I think was the time that this happened, but right around 2:20. I was just checking 2 gas stations. I left the last gas station that I checked to pull onto the highway, and I was making radio contact with the Wahoo Sheriff's Office because we didn't have radio communications available in the city at nighttime because we couldn't afford it. So I told them that everything was all secure. I pulled onto the highway and putting the mic down, I seen some flashing lights in front of me. First appeared to me to be a truck, I thought. As I got closer and put the high beams of the lights on the patrol car on this object started raising. These lights started raising up in the air to about 40 feet. I think I was something like 50 yards from this. These lights were flashing, and as they got bigger, as I got closer, it seemed like they were red flashing lights coming out of a porthole, which sort of circled the craft. It had like a catwalk going around the center of it. It was shaped like a football, very metallic, like a very shiny bumper. If you polished a bumper on a car, it had a sort of reddish orangey glow coming from beneath it. And then there was this white flash that came onto me in the patrol car. It felt as if we were being pulled. And then it was being pulled. We were being pulled up to the side of this bank to the left of the road and up towards this fill, the car and I. I felt nothing. At first, I felt kind of stunned and shocked. And then I felt sort of tingly. And as the car and I moved up the bank to the top of this fill, this object landed and some legs came out and it sat down. I was just sitting there really emotionless. I couldn't move. I may have even had my mouth open. I don't remember, being probably scared. This hatch came open, and this light came out of the hatch. And this form came down and looked the form of a human being. And this form started walking toward the patrol car with an object in both its hands, appeared to be hands. And he was walking straight toward the patrol car. As he was doing this, another form came out and started walking toward the patrol car also. As this being walked up to the front of the patrol car with this object in his hand, which looked sort of squarish oval type. It looked like it had a lens in front of it. And the only thing I could think was, oh my God, what's going to happen now? and this green light came out all over the car, and it sort of like went back in again. I felt a sensation then. And then I felt nothing, like I was just there, that was it. And this other being started walking up toward the car. I was sitting straight, looking straight. I couldn't even move my head. And he walked up to the car, and the window was about 3/4 of the way rolled down, and he had an object in his hand, a silver object that looked like a big pencil with a round ball on the end of it. And he pressed it against the side of my neck, which I felt some pain from, and said, "Ouch." Then he stepped back, and I sort of sat there, and he opened up the car door and just went like this. And I sort of raised up out of the patrol car, and I was looking at him, and he was looking at me, and he said, "Are you the watchman of this town?" And my response was, "Yes, sir." He said, "Come with me, watchman." We got up to the hatch to where you went inside of the spacecraft, and we just sort of like floated up into the first level. And he says to me, "Watchman, come with me." And we were in a circular room, and there were a lot of cylinders about 4.5 feet high and about 2 feet wide that circled the whole room. And it had sort of like a cable running through it. 2 cables running through these. They looked like tall batteries to me. And then, in the center of this room was a huge cocoon, or, like this shaped object, was spinning. And it was giving off colors like the rainbow, and was about 20 feet long. And it seemed like these cables were coming up and connecting to these 2 block things that came down each end of it. And we walked the complete circle in there as I said, "What is this?" And he said, "This is how our craft operates." And he said it operates on electrical reversible magnetism. And then I looked at him, and he said, "Come with me, watchman." And we walked back over to where I had came up in with him, and this glass sheet came down, and we stepped onto this, which I felt. And we moved up into the second level of the craft. And lo and behold, I've never seen anything like it before in my life. So many different types of instrument panels and computer-type things that you just wouldn't believe it. This cone thing was right in the center of the floor. You can see half of it from on top and half of it from the bottom.
At an unmarked building in the Avery, MS walks inside, and just right there are men in uniform, INDUSEC, industrial security personnel holding weapons, and then there is a craft just floating there. It is a saucer, almost like a top-shaped craft, but there's paneling removed from the bottom where he sees, similar, I know how interested you are in Bob Lazar, an inverted cone type thing. He doesn't know what this is, no idea, but it's like an inverted triangle cone that seems to be free-floating in the bottom little jutting out part of the saucer.
But it gave off a red glow that sort of, not flashed, but kind of died down and then came back up again. And he says, "Watchman, come with me." And we walked over to his screen that was up on the side. I say wall. It was sort of like a TV screen. And he pressed some buttons and I guess flipped some switches. I wasn't paying too much attention to him. I was looking at the screen. And some stars in the sky appeared on there. And he put his finger up like this, and he said, "This is where we're from, watchman." And then he put his hand back down. He didn't say where, and he didn't say the name, he just pointed. The purpose that we're here is to get electricity. And there was another being standing a little distance away, and the man turned to him, and they both looked at each other, and he started depressing the buttons. And he says, "Watch, watchman." And there was this antenna on the outside of the spacecraft, which angled up toward a power unit. And this bolt went out, a color I've never seen before in my life. And I don't even think I could describe it. Went out, came back, and this stayed like this for about 3 minutes, and then it went off. And he turned and looked at me, and I felt I was getting an awful lot of roll of input of words I couldn't understand. And he reached up and he touched me on the shoulder. And he felt real when he touched me, and I think at that time I did touch him, and he felt real to me. And he says, "Watchman, come with me." We walked back over to the exit. I'll say where we came up and the glass sheet came down again. And we went up into the third part of the craft, which was the observation deck, he said. And as we stepped off, he said, "Watchman, come with me." And we walked over, and we were standing there looking out of a big glass window type thing. And there was a control panel right in front of it. And there were 2 chairs that looked like dentist chairs, I've ridden a dentist chair, but really a superstructure of a chair, better than a dentist chair. And we looked out the window, and I could see this one being walking back and forth by where my patrol car was. And I think I said, "Wow." And he didn't. He turned to me and he said something I don't understand. And he said some more things that I didn't understand or couldn't make out, and I still don't. And then he pointed his hand toward the plate glass window, as I say, referred to the stars out there. And he says to me, "Watchman, one day you yourself will see the universe as I have." And he reached up and he touched me on the shoulder like this. Like grabbing you on the shoulder like a man does to steer you away. And he says, "Come with me, Watchman." And then he stopped and he said, "Watchman," and I turned around like this to look at him. And it felt like I was getting more input of something that I couldn't understand. Then he says, "Watchman, come with me." We walked over, and we went down all the way out of the craft. As we got outside, this other being started walking back toward the spacecraft and boarded it. As we were walking toward my patrol car, we stopped right by the patrol car, and I turned to look at him, and he was looking at me. And then again, it felt like I was receiving input of words of some kind that I couldn't understand. And he turned. No, he sort of lifted his hand, and then he turned and walked back to the spacecraft, floated up inside. The catwalk thing started spinning. The lights started flashing off and on. This red-orange glow came out from beneath it. It started lifting up in the air, and I guess it got about 100 feet and just shot straight out of sight. Let me tell you, I was scared. I started feeling me again. When I was aboard the spacecraft, I hardly had no feeling at all. My body was tingling. I was perspiring. I was hot. I felt nauseated. I got back into the patrol car. I turned it around, and I headed back for the police station. On the way to the police station at a high rate of speed, I tried to make communication with Wahoo Sheriff's Office, and it appeared the radio was dead. I got to the station. I jumped out of the car in a fast walked into the police station, and I noticed the wall clock in the police station said 1 minute after 3 a.m. Well, I went directly to the bathroom. No, to go to the bathroom, but to drink water because I was hot. And I walked back into the main room of the police station. We had a real small police station. It was about 20 by 20. And I sat there at the table, and I lit a cigarette, and I said, "Wow, what the hell happened? Something happened to me. Did I really see a flying saucer? Did this really happen to me?" I looked at my report log, and I remembered through all the training and everything I went through that regardless of the nature of what it was, put it in your report book because you just might need it. So I looked at my report book and I got my pen out and I wrote, at 2:30 a.m., December 3rd, 1967, I saw a UFO at junction 6 and 63, believe it or not. Now, this was followed by another police officer that came in according to Mr. Schirmer. He says at about 6:30 that morning, a fellow officer came in and I explained to him what happened to me. And the fellow officer says, "I believe you, Herb. One time, I was on my way to Wahoo, Nebraska, and I was driving down the road. I looked over. Lo and behold, there were 2 UFOs sitting in a field, and these little green men were out there walking around it, waving at me." I said, "Sure, Paul." And he says, "I don't think you should tell anybody, Herb, because I don't think anybody's going to believe you. Matter of fact, you're going to lose your job if you tell the people." But I said, "Paul, it's the truth." He said, "Well, you know." He said, "A lot of people won't accept the truth." I said, "Well, I'll wait for the chief." He says, "No, I'll go on home." So I went home. And I was, I really felt like everything was drained completely out of my body. And I laid down on the couch, and as I laid there, I started getting a buzzing feeling in my head. And I felt like I had pressure on my body. I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't, How you try to open your mouth and you can't say help? I was trying to say help, And then I went off to sleep, and the phone rang, and it was the chief. And the chief says, "Get your butt down to the station right now." "What is this? You mean you've seen a UFO?" I said, "I don't feel good. I'm sick, and I'm not coming down to the police station." He said, "I'll be right over." So the next thing, the TV came in, press came in, newspapers, radio stations, and telephone calls started coming in. And 2 days later, ridicule started coming in, believe me. And I had a man run 3 blocks, huffing and puffing. He owned a Goodyear tire shop near Ashton, Nebraska, and he wrote me, Herb, if you ever see another flying saucer and it lands, you tell them I want to sell them a set of tires. The phone ring. This is the planet Mars, really ridiculous stuff. I think, though, being here in Florida, one of the neatest walkings I got was right out here in the lobby. The gentleman out there is selling books, and I walked up and he says, Herb Schirmer? I says, yes. My name is so-and-so. And I was taken aboard a police cruiser. And I thought that was neat. Some key takeaways from Schirmer's story are that A, his car sort of broke down, which is not uncommon for UFO encounters. B, the beings seemed benevolent. They didn't seem to want to do him any harm. And C, once aboard the craft, they took him to all sorts of different levels, showed him around, gave him the tour of the ship, which is, once again, not uncommon during abductions. Also, the physical sensations that he felt is something that reverberates throughout the UFO abduction history, namely this sort of tingly feeling, which I thought was really interesting, and the fact that he really couldn't look away from them, which we'll get into in a second. And then post-abduction was this feeling of being ill, this sickness, almost like radiation poisoning. Now, we've seen this with Antonio Villas-Boas, and we've seen this with, honestly, so many other abduction cases, including a few that we're going to look into in just a second. Now, folks, there are some really, really interesting connections that I urge you to stick around for to later on in the video, because the beings themselves, their uniforms and their emblems actually show up in what seems to be multiple other abduction encounters. And right now, I've just been informed that we have Herbert Schirmer's, or one of Herbert's, Herbert Schirmer. I'm just going to say Herb, because Herbert Schirmer sounds, I can't say it without sounding like Kermit the Frog. Reporting here for Herbert Schirmer. We have, Herb's regression session. Now, the first one he did with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, was given to Herb, and we just don't have access to that one. Now, he's come out in several interviews and sort of dropped little things here and there, and researchers have dropped little things here and there. But in a book that I just found out that was published called Gods, Demons, and UFOs, we have Loring G. Williams, the hypnotist from Hinsdale, New Hampshire. We have his regression session recorded at the Holiday Inn in Des Moines, Iowa, and here's what emerged from Schirmer's mind. So Williams being the hypnotist and Schirmer being the subject. When I count to 3, you're going back to the morning of December 3. Just before you approach the UFO. 1, 2, 3. What are you doing? Driving down the highway, listening to a wreck report on the police radio. It's a bad wreck out on the interstate highway. What's the matter? Thought I saw something. What did you see? What time is it? I better check my watch. Well, what time is it? 2:30 in the morning. What's that up ahead? There's something on the road ahead. Probably a trucker with a flat tire. I'll turn on my brights. Whoa! The row of lights are very bright. They're flashing. The red lights are flashing real fast. My God, what is that thing? What? It's leaving the place and going up on the hill. I'd better follow. Where are you now? Going up the hill toward the light. It's very bright, very, very bright. The lights are flashing. I'll call. Who are you going to call? The police at Wahoo. 408, Wahoo, 408. Come in, Wahoo. The radio ain't working. What happened to the engine? What is that thing? Describe it for me. It's made of metal, and it's shaped like a football. The object has a silverish glow around it. There's a flashing light underneath it. It came in over the field, hung there for a minute, and it's flickering on and off. It is making a whooshing sound, and the lights are flickering very rapidly. How fast are the lights flickering? Jiminy Christmas. It must be going about twice a second. At 120 times a minute. Oh no, it can't be. What's happening? There are legs shooting out underneath it. It's hard to see. It's very bright. I think there are 3 legs coming out. They're telescoping. 1, 2, Now it is settling on the ground. Are you afraid? You're damned right. My hand is shaking. Why don't you start your cruiser and leave? I'm being prevented. What do you mean being prevented? There's something in my mind. I don't know, Lord. Oh no. Oh no. What's wrong now? They're getting out. The one, he's approaching the front of the cruiser. Oh no. It can't be. It can't be. I'm going to have my revolver ready. I'm being prevented from drawing my revolver. Something in my mind. The one in front of the car has a funny thing he's holding up. The stuff is covering the car and going all around it. What is this stuff? What color is it? It's like a greenish gas or something. Huh. It's all around the cruiser now. My God, what's happening? Oh, what's he doing? Who do you mean? The one in front of the car. He's pulling something out of his holster. He's pointing it at the windshield and pointing it toward me. It's bright, very bright. How bright? About like a flash thing on a camera, only brighter. Now what is happening? I was paralyzed and passed out. I can't remember anything. It's all black. What is the next thing you remember? My eyes are opening. I'm rolling down the window. There's two of them. I didn't see the other one. He grabbed me by the side of the neck. Oh. It hurt for a minute when he pushed against the side of my neck. Which side of your neck did he touch? The left side, just below the ear. Was there anything in his hand? I can't see too well. There might have been. Maybe there was something about his glove that scratched my neck. Was this the point where the welts appeared later? Yes. What happened next? I can't remember. Now I'm opening the door and standing up outside the car. The one is looking directly into my eyes. I don't like him to do that. Why not? His eyes are different from ours. They're more like a cat's eyes. Yes. Are you speaking to this person? He's asking me if I'm the watchman over the town. I'm telling him I am a policeman. He used the word watchman. That's an unusual word. Yes. Did he speak with his mouth or through the mind? I can't remember. He's standing perfectly still and staring into my eyes. I'm trying to look away. I can't remove my eyes from his. He's asking me questions. Tell us about them. So, before I continue, I just want a quick note here. I did fail to mention that in the previous interview, this sort of press conference that he held that we just read through, he had mentioned that there was a rod, some type of rod with a ball on the end of it. He also had mentioned that there was some other oval, squarish type thing with the lens on the end of it that, when pressed against his neck, made a prick. It's interesting that he doesn't mention it here. Now, remember, this is prior, what we're reading now, to what we had read previously. What we read previously is after he'd done all the regressions and sort of in his mind put together this story. So it's important to note that during this regression, there is no mention of an instrument. Are we witnessing some type of false memory due to the zeitgeist of UFO encounters and the information that's already out there? Is he embellishing based on what he's heard from other stories, or simply adding it in subconsciously? Another thing to note is the eyes. We talk about this a lot. We've mentioned it with Dan Burrish. We've mentioned it with Antonio Villas-Boas. We've mentioned it with several other abduction encounters that we've looked into. But the fact is that with these things, apparently when you look at them in the eye, you can't move. The eyes have some type of locking mechanism that prevent you from, veering your gaze. I'm convinced more than ever that a big part of this telepathy, or at least the technology that allows telepathy to happen, requires the eyes to lock. Very interesting. He's pointing to the power plant and asking, "Is this the only source of power you have?" I said yes. I asked him if he was real. He said he was very real. He's reaching out his hand and placing it on my shoulder. He's squeezing my shoulder. I'm not dreaming. He's asking me if I would ever fire on a spaceship. I replied no. He's asking me if I would like to go aboard the ship for a few minutes. I'm asking how the ship is operated. He's telling me it is by reversible electromagnetism, which has something to do with gravity. I'm walking alongside him. We're approaching the ship. The other one is right behind us. The other one keeps looking back at the cruiser. The lights in the engine are still dead on it. We're walking right underneath the craft. He's telling me to climb up. Right beneath the bottom is a circle deal. The circle deal is opening back, and there's a ladder coming down with a zoop sound. It's in telescoping sections. It's cold. Very cold. What is cold? The metal on the ladder is much colder than it should be. We're going up the ladder into the ship. Another pause here. And again, this statement was made after these regression sessions. So it's really interesting because during the statement, he said he floated up into the craft, which again, we hear time and time again from other contactee abductee stories. But here, he fails to mention it during his regression. It isn't very big in there. What's that noise? Oh, he's pointing to the ladder, which is retracting up into the ship. The circle deal is closing. Boy, that's neat. Whoops. I better keep my head down or I'm going to hit something. What will you hit? There are all kinds of boxes and gadgets and things hanging down from the ceiling. Please describe what you see. I'm standing in a room that is about 26 feet by 20 feet in area. The ceiling is about 6 feet high. The lighting in here is red and it's coming down from strips in the ceiling. They glow in a reddish way. Over to this side are a couple of chairs. They are around a panel. Must be a control panel of some type. There's a wide screen above the console. It is tilted down so a person sitting in the chair can look up at it. It must be some kind of vision screen or radar. No, it is much too big for a radar. I know what a radar screen looks like. That ain't it. You can look out the portholes that run around the ship. Now he's showing me how the craft operates. Well, that's really interesting because, again, in 1967, 68, or whenever this was done, I mean, we wouldn't have had big TV screens, right? So it really is interesting that he's describing this giant, what seems to be like a television screen, but he fails to have the vocabulary to accurately describe it. The closest thing that he can describe it to is like a radar screen, but he's like, even that. So it's very interesting. What else did you see? Boy, I could see a lot of things. There are tubes and pipes running everywhere inside here. He's asking me if I would like to see how some of their things work. In my mind, I'm thinking no, because I want to go home. But something tells me to say yes. He's showing me the things that look like computer machines. He pushes a button and the tapes start running. I'm starting to tingle again. The tapes run round and round and the rows of lights flicker on and off. Well, that's an interesting detail because now we're talking about some analog technology, which, let's face it, living in the future as we are today, we'd only use for aesthetic purposes. We found that digitizing telecommunications and audiovisual is much more optimal. Perhaps he's mistaken these turning things for tapes. Did he tell you why he was doing this? Yes, they did. No one talked for a while. He was punching buttons on the machine, through my mind. Somehow he's telling me things. There is something. He is speaking. This is an observation craft with a crew of 4 men. It is used for observation all over the world. There are several more like it. No, they do not. Who are you talking to? Dr. Sprinkle. Don't worry about the good doctor now. Just tell us what's happening inside the craft. It's pretty funny that there's this sort of confusion happening in his mind. He's clearly in a hypnotic state now, and he's confused about where exactly he is or who he's talking to. There's very much to explain. There are various types of devices, sending and receiving, which are much further advanced than ours. The guiding device is in the center of the craft. They have been observing us for a long period of time, and they think that if they slowly put out reports and have their contacts state the truth, it will help them. He is explaining to a certain extent that they want to puzzle people. They know they are being seen too frequently, and they are trying to confuse the public's mind. He is telling me they want everyone to believe some in them, so we will be open to their invasion. And think carefully now. Did he use the word invasion? Yes. Then this would mean they are operating to conquer the world? Oh, no. He used the word invasion, but meant it in a friendly way. He said it would be the showing of themselves completely. The public should consider in their minds that they should have no fear of these beings because they are not hostile. This is interesting here. We're talking about essentially aliens creating a psyop, saying that they want to puzzle people. They know they're being seen too frequently, and they are trying to confuse the public's mind. Now, that can possibly be the best explanation for the varying amount of sightings of crafts and beings and different, interactions that people have had throughout the decades. That would explain everything. It's just them trying to remain aloof. An interesting take. How long have they been watching us? He said they've been here for a very long time. Did they tell you exactly why they were here? No, sir, they did not. And where are they from? They said they're from a nearby galaxy. They told me they had bases on Venus and some of the other planets in our galaxy. Now, is there any defense against UFOs and the people in them? I would not even disclose that to the Air Force because they would try to destroy them. Their beings can be stopped just like we can be stopped. Bullets. But you cannot bust into one of these flying saucers. Yes, but is there a defense against them? Do we have a defense against them? You can't bust into a ship which you know nothing about. They are made of a metal that can withstand tremendous heats. The only crafts, now they said UFOs, have been knocked out of the air by radar. Before they hit the ground, the mothership destroys them by a built-in mechanism that blows them up and burns them. How can radar knock them out? I don't know. There's something, it's a long word which I can't pronounce. Ionization? I think it has something to do with that. Yes, that's the word. How do you know all of these things? I don't know. There's something in my mind. He's saying that while we were talking, they are also putting things into my mind about them. He's saying they do this with everyone they contact. Okay, another pause here. Very interesting. He did mention that they were flooding his brain with information, not unlike what Dr. Michael Masters was talking about when he had some type of strange encounter with, what seems to be non-human intelligence.
They eventually put me into a sort of trance where my eyes were open. Everything was black, so I couldn't see.
It went black?
Yeah, and they told me that would happen. This is what will happen. We need to put 3 things in your brain. You won't have access to the information. You'll still have your eyes open, but everything will go black from top to bottom, and then you'll start to see and feel information. That is exactly what happened. I did see the information. It did go in my brain like a freaking fire hose. And when it was over, I felt like my head was very heavy. I could barely even lift it. And I don't have conscious access to that information.
Also, the fact that the mothership would destroy the UFOs so that we couldn't salvage them, I thought was very interesting as well. And the fact that he says they can withstand tremendous amount of heat. Now, that's an interesting detail. He didn't say these were bulletproof or that they were harder than steel. He said withstanding heat specifically. And that is something that was brought up by the 4chan whistleblower in saying that when they tried to repurpose the vehicles that they found, they had a really hard time because they couldn't heat up the metal. It was very, very difficult. So just another point of connection there. Which one of us would be most likely to be contacted by these people? And this would be up to them, not us. I was told that I just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time or something like that. They have no plans for patterns for contacting people. It is by pure chance, so the government cannot determine any patterns about them. There will be a lot more contacts, he told me that. Do they have bases on Earth for their saucers? Yes. There are definitely bases in the United States. There is a base located beneath the ocean off the coast of Florida, which is a big thing. This is a big city under the ocean. He said this would be used for our benefit and theirs. There is a base in the polar region. He did not say whether it was North or South Pole. There's another big base right off the coast of Argentina. These bases are underground or underwater. That is so interesting for many reasons. Again, the 4chan whistleblower comes to mind because what happened to him was also on the coast, on the East Coast, where the Atlantic is, near, the Bermuda Triangle, in and around that area, which is close to Florida. But also, there is a case which we'll be talking about shortly, another case that features not only the same type of creatures with the same type of uniforms and everything else, but also it happens in Miami. And he's taken to an underwater UFO base. I'm not kidding. This is crazy. This is like an insane connection here. My mind's being blown right now. Did they describe how these bases were operated? They did not. He just told me what I repeated. What do you know about motherships? The motherships are huge affairs, which are what we would call interplanetary stations. All of their headquarters, types of operations are carried out in these big crafts. He showed me one on the screen. They are the main observation stations, big peeping things so high out in space that we cannot acknowledge them. The saucers arrive there carried by the motherships. The motherships have equipment to look in on anything on Earth into any factory, home, or house. They also monitor our Earth communication systems. That is so cool. They can look into people's houses. That would make sense. But what's even more interesting here is that the saucers are in this giant mothership. This reminds me of Travis Walton. Travis's case, he was taken into a saucer-like craft, met these beings, short, large heads. They didn't have black eyes. They had kind of like normal eyes, big brown eyes, big round brown eyes. Orange jumpsuits, and he was scared off and then ran into like taller Pleiadian Nordic-looking folks with fishbowls on their heads that took him into a giant hangar, which he then was shown these other tic-tac and pill-shaped crafts, possibly some type of mothership as well. So just an interesting connection there. What is the speed of a flying saucer? I was told it was in excess of 150,000 miles an hour. What metal did they use in them? I was told it was 100% pure magnesium. The metal was very brightly polished and the surface was very smooth. He let me run my hand over it and there was not a rough spot anywhere. Did you see any beds, water compartments, or toilet areas on the craft? I didn't see any, although there may have been some. What are their thoughts about people on Earth? They think we're doing things in the wrong. If that is true, why don't they teach us the correct way? They did not provide any information as to why they left us to our own ways. Would you say they might have kidnapped people who might have stumbled onto their crafts? I was informed they had picked up cows, dead bodies of animals, and some people. These are used for experiments. There is a program of breeding analysis, but it was not discussed to any extent. I think some people have been picked up and changed, so they may have agents in our world. They are very smart about the brain and how to change it. That is so crazy. Now we're talking about hybridization, we're talking about cattle mutilations, but also kidnapping of corpses, which is quite interesting because I have heard of cases of UFOs being seen scanning certain graveyards. Wow. Did you see any weapons on them or the ship? They carry their ray weapons in the holsters. These do not kill but paralyze. There were no weapons on the ship, although I might not have known what they looked like. This was a very strange place, unlike anything I've ever seen. It's very cold inside the ship. What about their color spectrum? You mean the kind of colors? It's the same as ours. You saw something in the sky blinking red, you would think it was an airplane. Did they mention anything about water? They asked about the Lincoln City Water Reservoir, which was just down the hill. In some way, which I do not understand, they draw a type of power source from water. This is why we see them over rivers, lakes, and large bodies of water. That's interesting. Many cases of crafts not only emerging from water, but what seems to be like even rubber tubes going into water, like pumping them out, and like very bizarre interactions with water, almost as if we're some type of gas station here. Now you've been very cooperative. Let's go back to the saucer. Did they tell you anything to say or do before you left? Were you programmed to say something in any manner? Yes. He's looking directly into my eyes and saying, I wish you would not tell that you have been aboard this ship. You are to tell that the craft landed below in the intersection of the highways, that you approached our machine and then it shot up into the air and disappeared. You will tell this and not speak wisely about what has happened here tonight. You must speak unwisely because we will return again to see you 2 times more. There will be one of your people who will approach you. You will know them when they come. He's giving me a very strange look. His hand is on my shoulder. He's saying a word like I have never heard before in the whole world. I can't even pronounce the thing. He must be saying goodbye. He is walking me back to the hatch. The 2 men who stayed outside are staring up at me when I step out. They are climbing back into the ship and making motions for me to return to the cruiser. I'm getting into the cruiser. The legs on the saucer are retracting. A reddish-orange light is coming out of the bottom of the ship. There is a humming noise as it winds up and shoots straight into the sky. It was like a shooting star. Disappeared that fast. It was exactly 102 feet in diameter, I was told. Standing on the tripod, and not measuring the antennas. It would be about 35 feet high. With the tripods retracted, the ship would be about 20 feet in height. Did they communicate by voice or through the mind? It seemed to be both methods. It appeared they did all of their own speaking through the antenna devices over the helmets on their ears. The one who talked with me spoke with a voice, with a sort of broken English. It was very strange sounding and appeared to come from deep inside him rather than from his mouth. I can't describe it. He said they studied our languages on Earth through some sort of machine. My mind tells me that they have computers to speak any language, somehow, wherever they may land. That's so interesting. This also comes up a little bit later. We'll be looking into this because the idea of basically tech-assisted telepathy is interesting to me because it sort of bridges the gap between this impossible, unattainable, non-human intelligence and the human mind. If tech is involved somehow, then, maybe we're not that far away, technologically speaking at least. Did they wear any sort of air tanks or breathing devices? No, their faces were open. What about outside the ship? They wore no device that looked like it might be used for breathing. Fact is, I never really noticed whether they were breathing or not. That puzzles me. I can't forget those eyes. He is looking at me. He is not blinking or anything. He's looking directly at me with those cat's eyes. The cat's eyes is also very interesting. Immediately, I'm reminded of Lacerta, the reptilian or reptile-like species that also have these sort of cat's eyes, these vertical slits. And as you'll see a little bit later, the emblem which is described by Lacerta is actually one and the same that is described here by Mr. Schirmer. And we'll get into that, and there's other cases as well. Very, very interesting find. This has been a very long session, and you've been very cooperative. Now, you'll remember everything that occurred here this afternoon. Your mind will open up to recall other details that you may have forgotten. As his memory of the missing minutes aboard the flying saucer was restored, Herb Schirmer reported the flying saucer was equipped with a robot-controlled baby moon. He used baby moon because it looked like a moon-shaped hubcap. The device was a saucer-shaped object approximately 6 feet in diameter. It was constructed of the same silverish metal as the saucer. It was just a plain disc-shaped object with no openings or antenna that he could see. Schirmer recalled, "They told me it was used for reconnaissance and surveillance of an area. As I understood them, the baby moon shot out of the saucer and checks out the area before they land." Now this is interesting. Could this also be the sort of drone-like things that people are observing, or these spheres that are filmed all around the world seemingly to have some type of reconnaissance, purpose? I don't know. Very interesting, though. I keep saying it's interesting, but it is interesting. I'm interested. The one who did most of the talking, I think of him as the captain, said the baby moon was equipped with highly advanced instruments and a thing he called a scanning device, he continued. It transmits pictures and sound back to the saucer. It can flip a switch and lock their vision screen in on the baby moon. He said the moon had been developed as a robot control device because we are a very hostile people and they needed something to scan an area before landing their bigger saucer, Schirmer explained. If the baby moon probe shows activity in an area, they pull it back and withdraw. He said that only in certain cases did they ever land when there was someone around the area. Schirmer was also informed that the baby moon contained a powerful destruction unit inside the gleaming shell. He said they could press a button and the moon would burn itself to pieces and blow up, Schirmer added. The baby moon would explain one of the largest mysteries in UFO sightings. Small, circular disks have been seen hovering over fields and swamps, speeding down highways, swooping down on automobiles. If Schirmer is correct, these objects are actually radio-controlled spy-in-the-sky devices. When he explained about the baby moon, he led me to the screen above the console in the saucer, Schirmer explained. He flipped the switch and the screen came on instantly. I saw the outside of the craft on the screen. It wasn't like television, it was the sharpest, clearest picture I'd ever seen. It was like those 3D movies where you wore glasses. Was there a color picture? Schirmer was thoughtful for a moment. I believe so. I can't be certain. It was pretty dark outside. The picture I remember was of two of the crew walking back and forth like guards. They walked very stiff and straight like soldiers. Their heads moved back and forth like they were looking for someone. All I saw was their silver suits against the black background. Schirmer stated the saucer captain flipped another device on the elaborate console below the screen. 3 flying saucers came on the screen, flying in formation. He said they were very high above us. I said he must have awfully good cameras, and he replied that it was all done with light beams, whatever that means. The saucer captain also informed Schirmer that some saucers were equipped with peeping devices. These devices also operated on light beams, were reported capable of scanning any home or building in the world. He indicated that ships with these devices stayed high above the Earth and locked their beams in on where they wanted to be, Schirmer said. Could these devices be the products of an advanced civilization? Our scientists are now developing holography, a form of image projection using light beams. Holography produces 3-dimensional, lifelike images that are virtually free of distortion, superpowered electronic listening devices that are used in Cold War to spy on other nations. It is entirely within the realm of reason that an advanced technology could produce devices described by Herbert Schirmer. And that is the end of this little regression session. Very fascinating indeed. I'm so glad that we got this. Thank you to our researchers for pulling that up for me, because without which we would have missed out on some key details. Now, one thing I did want to share was this video here. This was shared by Tom DeLonge, yes, the singer for the famous band Blink-182 and frontrunner of To the Stars Academy, and also missing in action for the last few years. Tom, if you're listening to this, I'd love to have you in the skiff. But this video features what seems to be some wobbly, smaller, disc-like object, also making a sound, and what seems to be scanning this man's pickup truck. This, to me, looks exactly like what Herb was describing. There are some interesting cases that I would love to get into post-Schirmer, but prior to this, there is some more information about Schirmer that I think is really, really pertinent. By the way, Schirmer was also subjected to a stress detector or lie detector test and passed. It was his friend Chief Walashin who went to the site as well and found a small piece of metal, had it tested, came back as nothing special, but he emphasized that he doesn't report anything he doesn't see. speaking about Schirmer. Schirmer was also shown a constellation of a sun surrounded by 6 planets, okay, in some type of galaxy. He also drew out the inside of the craft as well as the mothership that was shown to him on the screen, featuring different symbols on the mothership. And one of those symbols, kind of looks like a snake. Notice the mothership is also cylindrical. Schirmer then describes the beings, and he says on the left side of the space visitor's head was a small antenna. The skin on his face was of gray color, his nose was long and flat, and his mouth was narrow and slit-like. His eyes looked like cat's eyes. So the spaceman was 4.5 to 5 feet tall. He wore a close-fitting hooded silver-gray uniform, black boots, belt, and gloves. On the left chest was a red emblem of a winged serpent. The man's proportions were normal. He says he's not a churchgoer, but looks to the Bible quote as a source of comfort, that he's not going crazy. From Ezekiel chapter 1, "And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire unfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. Out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. And he's told he'd be revisited by these creatures. He never was, and he was transparent about that fact. He wouldn't lie about it, he says. He ended up quitting his job out of ridicule, and he was harassed. His car was blown up, according to Schirmer. There was even an effigy of him hung by its neck, and they put like a star on the chest, like a sheriff's star, wrote his name across it, and shot holes into it, and then brought it to the morgue as some type of sick practical joke. So he would pull people over, and people would recognize him from, the tabloids and the news and the outlets, and they would rip up their speeding tickets right in front of him. He was just not willing to sit through the ridicule anymore and ended up retiring, but never, ever going back on anything he'd said. And he even tried to go into private investigation, but when his bosses found out his sordid UFO past, they told him to kindly move on. And so, for somebody who could be hoaxing or making this up, it's not a really good financial, social strategy. So if you're looking for motivation, I just don't see it here. The winged serpent is really interesting, and so is the being, so is what they look like. And here is where I made this connection. Because in 1979, January 3rd, about 11 years later, just outside Miami, Florida, Filiberto Cárdenas, his friend's wife and daughter, were driving to get a pig to eat. They were going to buy a pig. When all of a sudden the car starts breaking down. The lights don't work, the ignition doesn't work, they're on this sort of deserted road. Filiberto gets out to try and check the wires, try to see what's going on, when all of a sudden he hears a buzzing, what is described as a sound of a swarm of bees, followed by a bright blue light that engulfed him. And then before his friend's very eyes, Filiberto was lifted into the air. According to them, according to 3 other witnesses, he was lifted up into the air, screaming, "Don't take me, don't take me." Left abandoned, his friends were terrified. The car began to work again. They took it directly to the police station. The police, who later logged the case as a close encounter of the third kind officially. They wrote this down, a close encounter of the third kind. I think it was Miami-Dade County, which is interesting because it's also near Homestead, which is home of Coral Castle and so many other interesting, things that have taken place. Filiberto was found hours later, about 16 miles away from where he was last seen, disoriented, dizzy, and could barely speak Spanish. Under hypnotic regression, he remembered more than he could at first. He described being taken aboard a craft by human-sized figures in silver one-piece suits with hoods and button-like earpieces. On their chest was a serpent insignia. Their faces were human-like but emotionless, slanted dark eyes with lashes, a flat nose, and a long, thin mouth that barely moved. They placed a helmet-like device on his head, and he heard them switch through languages almost electronically, German, English, Spanish, as though cycling through frequencies until they settled upon a tongue he understood. So already we're finding multiple correlations to the previous story. The technology used for languages, the earpiece, the suit, the physical appearance of them, including the serpent emblem or insignia. Then came the examinations, long needles piercing his flesh, clusters of puncture marks later confirmed by doctors. They showed him alien horizons and led him beneath the sea through an opening in the rock into what felt like an underwater base. The walls glowed, the air vibrated with energy, and the machinery seemed alive. Also, in this base, when he got here, there was a giant serpent symbol on the door. Where have we heard this before? Lacerta. We'll get there. And a few months later, it happened again. This time, his wife was taken with him, Iris. Under Regression, she also confirmed many of the same details, the silver suits, the serpent emblem, the strange language switching, and together they were told that humanity faced famine, wars, and the arrival of a great light in the sky, an event that would force mankind to choose between destruction or transformation. The marks on their bodies, the consistency of their memories, the witnesses who saw Filiberto taken, and the police report itself all remain. So interesting. I think it's funny too, and we'll perhaps do a whole other episode on the Cardanis because I think that one deserves it. I do have the hypnotic transcripts. There are 4 sessions that we can read through, which would be really interesting because they say some interesting stuff about China leading the way for disclosure, which is kind of messed up, and the fact that they're working closely with China. I don't know. Really interesting. But one of the funny little tidbits is that she lights up a cigarette in their USO base underwater. And she lights up this cigarette and they all start sneezing. And then he asks her to put it out because it's like bad for their health. So like, why would you even add that into the story? It seems so silly. We are now going to shift to a few other cases that feature these emblems. Newfoundland, Moorlands, Newfoundland, the fall of 1974, perhaps 7 years after Herbert Schirmer, a lone male driver, radio dies, surrounded by a glowing blue light, a cone-shaped craft with blue and red lights, later seen landed in 4 legs, okay, but a very tall man in a silvery suit with a black chest crest, a metallic triangle with a black snake appeared. And then he loses time, 3 hours missing, and he appears back in his car. Okay, no regression there to report. But we got a silvery suit. Okay, there's a height difference, maybe multiple races working together, not unheard of, but also an emblem with a snake again. Now let's go to 1973, a year before. November 3rd, 1973, about 80 kilometers north of Bogota, Enrique Castillo Rincon reports being abducted. He puts this in a book, but one of the notable things, first of all, he says he was abducted by Pleiadian type, so tall, sort of like blondish characters, but they also had a winged serpent symbol. And yet another connection here, because in 1978, a gentleman by the name of Bill Herrmann, Bill Herrmann's had multiple encounters. You can read about them in the Wendell Stevens books, but that is a photo right there that Bill Herrmann took. He took some of the most compelling UFO pictures I've ever seen in my life. He says that these beings were from Reticulum, and wouldn't you know it, these beings on their little jumpsuits had a serpent with wings. Now, these weren't the same beings. They were wearing rust-colored jumpsuits. They were about 4.5 feet tall, had like spongy-like skin, large pale heads, with big round brown hazel eyes, small mouths. Doesn't this sound like another description? Yes, folks, if you're not familiar, Travis Walton describes the exact same beings. Rust-colored jumpsuits, big round eyes, big round pale heads. And they all communicated telepathically. to wrap this up in a nice, neat little bow, because I know this is a lot of information from a lot of different directions that we'll eventually, hopefully, get into, Lacerta. Lacerta, I think, is probably some of the most interesting pieces of information here. Now, we don't know for a fact that Lacerta wasn't copied from all of these previous things. Obviously, I'm aware of this, that the original report in 1968 could have, everything else that followed could have been copied from, right? I get it. But Lacerta says that her species symbol was a blue serpent with 4 white wings on a black background. Lacerta also mentions large cigar-shaped carriers that feature their symbols on the outside of them. Not unlike what Herbert Schirmer was shown. She talks about technology based in magnetism and manipulation of gravity, talks about telepathy, obviously, that's been used, throughout most of these cases. Did we somehow stumble upon some type of galactic crew? Some interdimensional or interplanetary faction that sports these symbols? Folks, I'm so excited about this. I don't know, I'm trying to make everything very concise for you, but even Bill Herrmann, I would love to get into this because he also received script download of symbols that he wrote down, and he was given a piece of metal. There's all sorts of really interesting stuff. And then, Filiberto Cárdenas, his story is just so fascinating as well because we have all this information that they left him with, technical data and just really interesting stuff. And hopefully we'll get into that in the future. Hopefully that's something that you guys would want to see because I would love to bring that up. But lastly, I want to leave you with this. I'm going to read to you a little bit of a paragraph here that puts some of this into context and maybe gives us a little bit more guidance on why this symbol is important. You see, the image of the winged serpent appears in myths and sacred traditions across the world. In Greek mythology, the dracones were serpent dragons, often shown with wings, fierce guardians of treasures and sacred places such as the Golden Fleece. In Asia, Chinese and Japanese dragons combine the serpent's body with wings or flight through clouds, symbols of transformation, power, and cosmic balance. In India, the Nagas are powerful serpent beings, sometimes winged, associated with wisdom, water, and the underworld. While Garuda, the eagle mount of Vishnu, is often depicted in eternal struggle with serpents, embodying the dynamic between sky and earth. In Mesoamerica, the Aztec and Mayan deity Quetzalcoatl, or Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, was revered as a god of creation, knowledge, and renewal, bridging the heavens and the earth. Similar motifs appear among South American cultures, where winged serpents symbolized fertility, transformation, and the divine connection between the natural and supernatural worlds. Across these traditions, the winged serpent unites heaven and earth, embodying wisdom, hidden knowledge, and the threshold between mortal and divine realms. Are these species all working together? Is this just one part of the phenomenon that we're observing? Or, like Lacerta said, are there many factions that are fighting for this planet or for us? Are there species that are simply indifferent? Are we a giant farm? Are we an experiment? Are we slaves? One thing's for certain, it doesn't look like we're in charge. Folks, this was such a joy. Such a fun episode. I learned so much. I hope you did as well. If you want to support Area 52, join the membership here on YouTube or patreon.com/Area52investigations. And if you just want to further the conversation and keep the flow going, head over to our Discord channel where the conversation never ends. I hope you enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace and love.